Good morning, everybody. So today we're going to continue trucking along on our idiot's guide to how to build an LS engine. Got our LQ4 converted LQ9, and today the topic is going to be installing the cam and lifters and the timing set. Pretty basic stuff, I know, beat to death, 8 million videos on it, but just something I wanted to do for the fun of it. So we're going to be installing, this should be a little bit of a hint here. I've had a lot of people asking me what we're even doing with this engine. This has become a very popular camshaft. So this is the no springs required version of this cam. It is a low lift cam. Still makes plenty of power though. The beauty of that camshaft is we can leave the whole entire valve train stock. We got low time valve springs, they'll be fine, and we can even use the stock push rods. Keeps the cost down, but you still get to have a little bit of fun. So I'm going to go ahead and get the cam out of the package, and I'll show you my way of getting the cam in the block without damaging bearings, and yeah, we'll go from there. Let's start in on the dirtiest, messiest part of this job. I went ahead and wiped down the cam with a clean towel and some isopropyl. Some guys insist that you absolutely have to run them through a parts washer, but I never have. We're going to just be using the Lucas assembly fluid again. This is a roller cam. You can use straight motor oil if you want to. It won't hurt anything. If it's going to sit for a while though, I would use something a little stickier like this. Okay, we got every lobe and every journal covered. Now it's time to get messy. This stuff is so sticky that it leaves strings all over the place. Now I will probably take a little extra. I like to put a little bit extra on the first bearing and a little bit extra on the last bearing. I like to put a little extra on the last bearing because by the time you get done sliding the cam all the way through, you've wiped so much of the lube off of the last journal of the cam, there ain't much left when you get down there. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave my slimy gloves on. Goes without saying, when you start the cam into the engine, this end's got to be towards the front of the engine with the pin that runs the top timing gear. I can't emphasize enough, you got to be very careful when sliding the cam into the block or you'll destroy the bearings. Just take your time. We're started in on the first bearing journal, and you just got to be really careful sneaking the lobes. Now we're on 2 bearings. You got to be careful running the lobes through the bearings. So I'm going to get to the last one and then we're going to stop. Excuse me, I'm going to get to the second to the last one and then we're going to stop right there. Now I'm going to degrease my gloves a little bit. Some guys use special installer tools to get a little extra leverage. Some guys will just thread a water pump bolt in there because they're pretty long. I personally just grab either a screwdriver or, in this case, one of my 3/8 ratchets, and I'm going to use the handle end of my 3/8 ratchet in the middle of the cam to give myself a little bit of extra leverage to get this cam all the way in. Simple as that. No damage, Everything's happy. Now I'm going to degrease my gloves a lot because there's no sense in being this slimy to do the rest of this job. This is our cam retainer plate. It is often one of the most overlooked pieces as part of the build. In a perfect world, you'd replace this every time, but this one is fairly new. It doesn't have very many miles or time on it. If you want to verify that this orange seal is not flat as a pancake and that you can see that it's raised up above the plate itself. If that's the case, I will generally reuse them and not worry about it. You want to make sure this surface on the block is clean where this contacts. Maybe put just a tiny little bit of oil on there so it lays down nice and flat. But this is what is going to hold the cam in position. So this particular cover, I don't remember if this is an LS1 cover. I think this might be my LS1 cover because it uses screws instead of bolts. You'll see either way though, some will have bolts, some will have screws. So these are the screws, they're Torx. In this particular case, it's a T40. We are going to put a little bit of Loctite on there. You don't want these screws coming out. I got enough Loctite for every bolt in one shot. These screws are 18 foot-pounds or 216 inch-pounds. The reason why this plate is so critical and why that is so important to have a good seal, where that orange rubber seal is, for oil pressure. If that leaks, you will lose oil pressure. You won't lose all oil pressure, but you won't have very good oil pressure. And yes, if you have a lot of experience, you can just jam these things in with your little baby Milwaukee impact and it'll probably be just fine. So we got a brand new Cloy's just basic timing set. I think it's the one you can get on Amazon for like $39 or something like that. I'm going to use the gear out of it. I'm probably going to use the GM timing chain though, because it didn't have any time on it. So goes without saying, this is our locator hole. This sets the timing on that pin of the cam. So just get that set on there and you're good. So let's get those 3 bolts put in. Okay, so before I Loctite these 3 bolts, we're going to set the chain in place. And to set the chain in place, we want the engine to be in time. The number 1 piston needs to be at top dead center, and that is going to put the dot at the top on the crank sprocket. On the upper cam gear, this is the dot. It's not really a dot, it's just a little notch. That is going to be facing straight down at 6 o'clock, directly opposite of the dot at 12 o'clock on the lower gear, and like I said, top dead center. This way we can put the chain on. This should be the chain out of this motor that has like 10 hours or so of runtime on it. Now to get this stuck in place, you can't just set it on there, it won't go that way. You have to drape it over the top gear. And yes, I'll squirt a little oil on this before it gets sealed up. Now we're going to take it, we're going to hook the crank gear right like that. There we go. Yeah, that chain's pretty tight. I'm happy with that. You're always going to have a tiny little bit of play in the chain. It's not going to be like a guitar string, especially when the engine's cold. So now we can Loctite our top bolts. timing gear. The torque for these bolts is 26 foot-pounds, and I'll tell you the inch-pounds here in a second. I'm not good enough to do that kind of math off the top of my head. 312 inch-pounds is what I'm going to be shooting for. Okay, that is happy. So now, the general consensus in most shops, if you want to double check yourself, you got to roll the engine through until the crank goes around twice and the cam goes around once. Then those two dots at best line back up with each other. So here's our dot, here's our no dot. We've made it halfway through the cycle. Now we've met back up with each other and our piston has returned to top dead center. This engine is in time. I'm not going to go over degreeing a cam on an LS motor because 99% of people outside of the racing industry, they're just using non-adjustable timing sets. So you're just putting it together. We got a little bonus, little extra treat. So this particular LQ4 block, it's a 2005 model, is pre-drilled for the plastic style chain dampener. Comes with the bolts. It's got the little plastic inserts inside to retain the bolts. So we're going to put that on and we're going to torque it up to 216. This is an optional part. You don't have to have this. I like to run them. Even if it's just giving me the warm and fuzzies and not really doing anything important. And of course, these are going to be 13 mil. It's almost as bad as working on a friggin' German helicopter where you need every tool in the toolbox to put the thing together. Should have got my little electric zippy zappy out. There we go. See, I grabbed my ratchet, so that went all the way down. Oh, they're 12s. Nice. Let's use some real oddball stuff. What do you think this is? A Toyota? Hopefully the fan noise isn't too obnoxious. It's hotter than hell outside today. All right, let's see if the little offshore bolts will handle normal LS torque. I pretty well have them torqued up with the old 3/8 ratchet. Me likey. I'm going to wait to put the oil on this chain until I set the cover in place. But for now, we're ready to move on to setting the factory lifters in place. So these are the lifters that came out of this engine when this engine was replaced under warranty. So I want to go through and look at them and make sure that there's... I looked at them when I took them out. I didn't see anything glaringly wrong with them. Just going to grab a towel and kind of wipe them off and make sure that they look nice. And if they do, we'll put them in. It is now after lunch. I got all these lifters cleaned up and inspected. You can see some of them have a little bit of staining on them. Like I said, these have very low time on them. And I'm not worried about this staining. Everything is totally smooth to the touch. It's just from sitting for so long. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to completely lube these up in the Lucas assembly lube. And then we're going to put them into the trays. I got the trays all cleaned up. Normally you would want to replace the trays, and depending on the amount of wear and tear on the engine, you'd replace the lifters as well. But in this case, these things are almost like new. Same with the trays. The lifters literally just kind of, it's a little bit of a friction fit into the tray. It will hold it unless it's really oily, but be careful because they can fall out. One question that I see asked a lot is, which way does the oil hole go? It absolutely does not matter. You can put them any way you want and they're going to get fed by the oil galley. But if it makes you feel better, put them however you want. Forwards, backwards. Sometimes when I'm really bored, I just make them all face each other. Doesn't matter though. So let me get these oiled up and then we'll set them down in the block and go from there. Okay, so I'm back to just snapping these lifters into the trays. Like I said, be careful not to dump them out onto the floor because you could wreck it. I usually oil them up. Now keep in mind, these have ran and they've got some oil inside of them already. But I like to put the assembly lube on there with it in the tray. That way you're not trying to hold on to these things while they're all slimy. I do believe there is some debate and maybe there's something specific in the GM manual about soaking LS lifters, like the old school small block and big block Chevy lifters. I personally don't ever soak them, right, wrong, or indifferent. I always try and get oil pressure built into the engine before I actually light it off. Usually by cranking the engine in either flood clear mode or by unplugging the injector harness or the ignition harnesses to the coil packs. A lot of options though. It's very hard to hurt one of these engines. So the tray has an up and a down. See if I can show you this without dumping the lifters out. This scallop right here goes up. The flat part of the tray goes down. You're literally just going to guide the lifters into the bores, into the lifter bores. Little wiggle and jiggle, and they go right in. That's all there is to it. The trays are held in by 4 small bolts. It's a special bolt with a shoulder on it so that you don't crush the tray. I don't know what the torque is on these bolts, but it's very light. So use your best judgment or find the torque online. In this particular case, I'll be using my calibrated wrist. Click, 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 click. That pretty much covers this particular session on putting a LS engine together. We went over putting the cam in and setting the timing, putting the timing chain on, torquing everything, putting the damper in, and putting the lifters in. If y'all are seriously bored enough to tune into the next one, we are going to, the 4th video is going to be about setting up the oil pump, pickup tube, the oil pan, and the front and rear covers. See if I can do that without it taken an hour. I'm trying to keep these videos relatively short. So anyways, stay tuned for the next one and we'll see you there.